To understand the physical center of the global economy, you have to look at facilities like this one in Taiwan. Inside these walls, engineers are fabricating the advanced logic chips that make artificial intelligence possible. This chart shows the global semiconductor foundry market by revenue. By the end of 2025, Taiwan captured over 70% of it. And when you look specifically at the most advanced cutting-edge chips, the 2 and 3 nanometer nodes, Taiwan controls over 90% of global capacity. The gap between Taiwan and everyone else is actually widening. Samsung controls about 7% of the market. And while Intel is pushing back into the foundry business, their newest process is currently yielding around 60% usable chips per wafer. TSMC is consistently hitting yields of 80 to 90%. You cannot just move this kind of manufacturing overnight. It relies on a hyper-dense ecosystem of hundreds of specialized suppliers, masking facilities, and testing centers, with decades of concentrated engineering expertise. Because the entire modern world relies on this specific island to produce its technology, Taiwan holds a unique geopolitical insurance policy. Analysts call it the Silicon Shield, a near monopoly on advanced manufacturing that makes any disruption to the island a guaranteed disaster for the global economy. If a geopolitical crisis or military blockade were to cut off those semiconductor shipments, the immediate economic fallout would bypass regional borders entirely. This chart shows the projected impact of a blockade in the Taiwan Strait. Within the first year, the global economy would suffer an estimated $5 trillion loss. That equates to a 5% drop in global GDP. As the GDP line falls, the cost of technology spikes. The price of logic chips would jump by nearly 59%. Supply chains for everything from electric vehicles to AI data centers would grind to a sudden halt. Trillions of dollars in global stability rest entirely on the uninterrupted operation of a few dozen fabrication plants. But the political and military variables holding that system together are currently shifting. Taiwanese leadership recognizes that economic indispensability might not be enough to prevent a conflict. President Lai Ching-te has stated that Taiwan requires an active physical defense to secure its borders. His administration recently proposed a $40 billion special defense budget. The goal is to raise Taiwan's military spending from its current 3.2% of GDP to 5% by the year 2030. The centerpiece of that massive financial commitment is a project they call the T-Dome. It is designed as a multi-layered integrated air defense network. The T-Dome will link domestic interceptor platforms, like the Skybow series, with existing American-made Patriot batteries. The network will also integrate newly acquired systems, like NASAMS. By pulling all these launchers into a single command architecture, Taiwan can detect and match incoming projectiles with the correct interceptor at various altitudes. This architecture is built to track and neutralize saturation attacks. If the People's Liberation Army launches a combination of ballistic missiles and dense swarms of one-way attack drones, the T-Dome acts as the filter, protecting strategic infrastructure. The introduction of the T-Dome marks a major strategic pivot. Taiwan is officially shifting its reliance away from a purely passive economic deterrent to a hardened physical shield. Building that physical shield requires resources and cooperation from the United States, and that relationship is generating friction. Washington is taking a highly transactional approach to the alliance. The Trump administration has openly pressured Taiwan to increase defense spending to 10% of its GDP, quadrupling their current military budget. At the same time, the United States is using the CHIPS Act and new trade agreements to try and reshore semiconductor manufacturing. The long-term policy goal is to bring up to 40% of American advanced chip demand back to domestic soil. This dual approach, demanding higher military spending while actively pulling manufacturing capability out of the region, is creating deep anxiety in Taipei. The concern among Taiwanese officials is straightforward. If the United States successfully replicates advanced chip production in places like Arizona and Ohio, Taiwan becomes less economically vital, and Washington might be less willing to defend it in a crisis. Conversely, American officials are frustrated by internal Taiwanese politics. With opposition lawmakers regularly delaying or freezing parts of that $40 billion defense budget, Washington questions Taiwan's actual commitment to its own defense. In attempting to secure their own independent supply chains and force higher military spending, The United States is actively eroding the mutual trust that holds this geopolitical alliance together. Despite billions poured into US and European reshoring, the core dependency on Taiwan's semiconductor output remains largely intact. An entire domestic industry cannot be transplanted through subsidies alone. Taiwan's efficiency relies on highly concentrated human capital and a localized supply chain that simply does not exist anywhere else. And there are strict mathematical limits to the new physical defenses. Even a fully funded T-dome system risks being overwhelmed if an adversary uses massive industrial capacity to launch millions of cheap, one-way attack drones. Huge expenditures are flowing into both economic reshoring and physical air defense networks. Yet neither strategy is capable of providing absolute security to the island or its trading partners. Looking at the geopolitical equation in 2026, the variables simply do not balance. There is no technological silver bullet and no clear diplomatic off-ramp. This diagram illustrates reality. The US, China, Taiwan, and the global economy are locked in a closed system of structural interdependence. Financial stakes are soaring, and military hardware is rapidly modernizing. But the baseline vulnerability connecting these nodes hasn't changed. The risk of a massive disruption to the global economy remains entirely unresolved, leaving the world perpetually teetering on the edge of the Taiwan Strait.